Okay, we should be live.
Neither did I.
We are
I
live.
don't see a red dot, but let's assume we're live.
Well, I have it. You don't have it?
What do you?
This is the boring part
I
of the
don't have
live where we
what?
go, are
No,
we
no
live
red
yet?
dot yet.
Well, my thing says we're streaming live on YouTube. Maybe I'm alone. Maybe you're not with
Well,
me.
let's assume that we are.
It sounds like a good way to do it.
Well, aren't we all alone?
Aren't we all alone? Is that what you just said?
So what's today's mug?
Today's mug is the last of my collection.
That's
Is
what I
the
just
blue
said,
mug.
you know?
It's blue.
I think I've gone back to. I've used this one before. I think. Stranger Things.
Stranger Things mug. It's good.
Was in a bit of a hurry. It feels like there's a bit of a lag.
Yeah, it does. Should we start again? Do you still have your internet connection unstable?
No, I think we'll work with it. It should be fine.
Okay.
What's the purple T-shirt though?
The purple T-shirt is Discover the Thrill of Space and Time.
Oh wow, that looks like it should be a cartoon, but it's not, is it?
No, I mean, there's a lot of stuff inspired from other stuff. I mean, clearly the Doctor Who type cabin in the middle, and it's like some voyages in the center of the Earth type thing. It's a bit
Lost
of
in
a
space with a little
lost in
robot
space
there.
type thing. I don't know why there's a little mummy tied. I mean,
Is it a mummy or a dog? I thought it was a dog.
It looks like a mummy.
Oh God, something weird going on. I've got on the Urban Regeneration Program from the Empire.
Nice. I like that. That is very cool.
So everyone always forgets, like in Clark's, where they talk about, isn't it in Clark's where they talk about what do the stormtroopers do?
Maybe. I'm not sure. I mean, I know Eddie Izzard does it in his skits.
Oh, he does, doesn't he?
There's the Death Star Canteen and a couple of others. And Clark's, they probably do talk about that. I can't remember that conversation. I'd have to watch it again. It's been a while.
Yeah.
But it's a long Star Wars related conversation. I can't remember if they go into what do stormtroopers do when they're off duty or whatever.
Yeah, it's something like that. So last week was a bit of a role reversal.
Yes.
And I was really interested and inspired by how much you really think about what's happening in Black Lives Matter, and I was really impressed with what you did.
Thank you.
Have you been coming up with more ideas?
No.
Really? Have you just ground to a halt? Because it seemed like you were super.
Honestly, so just more ideas in general, or honestly, I don't feel like this week was very productive compared to last week.
Okay.
We caught me on the tail end of last week, and I was like, I have plenty of projects and lots of things I want to do, and I just don't feel like I progressed the way I would have liked to this week. This week was just more down. It was more being worried about life and money and business coming in or not, and I did progress on a few things. I had a recording for my podcast yesterday, exchange emails. I've been preparing for a webinar that I'm doing on Tuesday. So I've not done nothing, but so wait, actually, maybe I do have a positive answer to your question. But the first thing coming to mind was that I didn't progress the way I wanted. So I did progress on getting ready for my webinar on Tuesday, which is going to be pretty likely to be quite chaotic because there's going to be a lot of people. And I'm doing an exercise that I've never done with so many people. So it's going to be interesting. And yeah, so that's one thing I've been looking at, which was, how do I do a playful strategy, interesting exercise with probably 70 to 100 people.
Oh, wow.
And demonstrating different types of use and different types of way you can do a remote webinar. And a lot of the people, so I've played and used a lot of online collaborative tools the past few months, even before then, but so I'm going to be using a digital whiteboard called Miro. And really, I could spend 45 minutes easily just explaining to people the basics of the tool, but that's not really interesting. So we're going to go straight into an exercise. But
this is really good, what you're saying, because it relates, believe it or not, to the question I'm about to ask you.
Great. Let's just do it.
And I'm
Rather than,
really,
because otherwise I'm
because
just going to talk about, like, I'm going to start moaning about how I didn't progress the way I wanted on my projects.
no, because the there's we talked about very much how you produce something, and like you've made this webinar and you did the video last week and it went really well. I want to go back to the thought process because,
Okay.
and it goes all the way back to school, because in
Okay.
school, so I
I'm not
teach
sure I'm a good example of that. All right.
no. You
Okay.
trust me, you will be. You got to trust me.
Okay, good.
I got these 15, 16-year-olds and 17, 18-year-olds, right?
I know.
So especially 17, 18-year-olds, right?
Yeah.
They've done exams. They've sat public exams.
Yeah.
They're getting ready to sit another set of public exams before they go to university. And every year, somebody, maybe they're 18, maybe they're 17. So they've been in school for like, what, 14 years, 13 years. They'll ask me this question: how do I revise?
It's a very
How do
good
you
question.
revise?
Yeah, it's a great question.
And every time it ends up being a discussion about a couple of things. Number one, how do you organize yourself?
Yep.
Number two, how do you take effective notes? How do you write things down? And ultimately, number three, how do you think? Because so much of school can be, here's a book, here's me writing on the board, write this down, have a discussion, that's it. And what I'm realizing, especially after that thread I read yesterday and the rabbit hole I went down, thanks to you,
you have to send me the other links you were looking at, because I hadn't even read those. But
well,
we'll come back to
it. You sent them to me. You sent me those links.
Yeah, but there's the one thread that you sent to me, I hadn't read.
Oh, okay. Well, but that thread that I sent you,
we'll explain.
It will all become clear. That thread you sent me, it really got me thinking about schools and revision. And it isn't about reading a book and being able to reproduce the book. It really, really, really isn't. It's about how do you think. And the thing that I read on the thread that we will explain that really,
I think that depends on the education system.
It might, but
in France, they're not. In France, it's very different.
Is it really?
Yeah. Well, you're not asked to how to think. You're asked to regurgitate things in a particular specific fashion.
Yeah, but that's exactly what happened here. And that's what they're asking me. The students are really asking me, how do I regurgitate the facts in the right way to get the result I want, rather than how do I revise? And when I start talking about how do you think, they're not so interested in it. But what's happened is that I'm moving away from emphasizing books. I think the books are important. But on the Twitter thread, the thing that really struck me was writing is for thinking, or something like that. And so much of school, and when they're writing, isn't about thinking, it's about reproducing, or it's not about developing their understanding. Mm-hmm. So before I let you loose on the question, the last little anecdote is, I was once in a classroom and I said, it's my job to get you to think. It was something, there was 3 steps, but I can remember the first one and the last one. It's my job to get you to, so it was my job, I remember them. It's my job to get you to think, hopefully learn something, and then do something else, something like that, change, something like that. Someone put their hand up and said, it's not your job to get us to think, it's your job to teach us. They said that. I was like, what is going on? This is a product of the education system and the way the world is and all of this stuff, and how linear our thinking is and on a page. So I know you talking about this online collaboration tool, Whiteboard, I think it speaks perfectly to this question of how do you revise? Because I think it really goes to how do you get your thoughts down in a useful way so that you can remember them later. That's really what they're asking.
Yeah. Do you think it's really interesting? I mean, I had that question in high school, although maybe I should have had it more than I had. Possibly. But I think there's an assumption and I'm already going on a tangent, but that student that stops you to say it's your job to teach us, not to make us think, is going with the general assumption, which is the environment of school up to then is going with that general assumption that your head is an empty vessel that's going to be filled in by what's going on with the teacher and the books and the stuff, which is not how the brain works. To begin with. And also, even if there is a certain amount of rote learning formulas and stuff like that all the way to high school, there's not always, I don't think, but there's a certain amount of the vast majority of studies after that where that doesn't work anymore. You need to start thinking.
Yeah.
I think, am I right or wrong?
You're pretty much like, there's kind of two schools.
But it depends on the topics, maybe. It depends on the teachers you might be professors you might be working with, but there's more tendency to need to think in different ways when you start hitting university, and even more so the rest of life, I think.
Yeah. And there's two schools of thought.
Depends what kind of job you're in and who you are. But
there's two kind of areas or schools of thought in teaching. There's the very traditional, like, learn everything by rote. You have to have knowledge. Knowledge is really important. What you remember is really important. And the more progressive, which is you don't need to know anything. You can find that out. You need to know the skills are important. Now, I'm not in either camp because I think both are important. You need to have a certain body of knowledge. And we talked about this before. You need to have a body of knowledge before you can have an intelligent conversation.
Yes.
But the schools are trying to teachers seem to be having this whole battle, whereas technology's moved on massively. The tools are so great. And I love like Evernote. I love Evernote. But it isn't even Evernote that's really important to me. It's how do I get things from my head into a useful place so that when I have a random thought, I can still find it. And this is kind of what you've been exploring recently, right?
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so back to your original question on how do I revise? Well, the most relevant to the students that we're talking to immediately, or at least at their stage, all the way to high school and even just a little bit after that, the way I revised was basically just pay attention during the class and just memorize a lot of what's said. I think that's how I did it. And then read your lessons a few times before the exam. I didn't take notes for a long time.
When you say read your lessons, what do you mean? Do you mean read
your notes, your notes. Or the book if you don't have notes.
And did you make...
I did have, so I was very bad at taking notes. I'm much better now, but I don't think of myself as somebody who is good at taking notes at all. Like, really don't. I started properly, and most of the time at school, I barely took, I think my final year of high school, I didn't take a lot of notes. I got rid of them anyway, so I don't really know if I could. I know there are notes that exist, but it depends probably on the topic. There were notes back then.
Did you
and to prepare for an exam, I would just read over my notes and or check the class book before the exam. So I'm not really a very good student, generally speaking.
But did you?
I started. Go ahead.
Did you copy off the board, or whatever it was?
I don't remember. Probably what the teacher was saying. And I did dabble a tiny bit in shorthand writing, but like super simple shorthand, not anything fancy. Just, there was a few different shorthands in France. It was just like to shorten a word with a symbol, things like that, but like not a lot. And so I'm also not a reliable witness of my own experience, just so everybody knows that. Because I always think I don't do much, but I guess to be fair, I would have to compare myself with other people in the class. I tended to be towards the, in the third best type thing, a third in, kind of like a little bit above average type spot. There were definitely people that were a lot better than me, had a lot more notes, were a lot more organized, and people who were less. But I think I said this already. I was mostly relying on my general ability to remember what was being said in a lesson and regurgitate it.
But do you know of what any of those people are doing now?
High school people?
Yeah.
Not really. There's a few I reconnected with on LinkedIn and Facebook, but I've never. Oh, actually, no. There are a few. So all right. So actually, I had a lunch a few years ago. Sorry, I apologize to anybody. Actually, if anybody's watching this that I was in high school with, you can just like reach out and tell me what you're doing. But I know that one of them is a lawyer in Hong Kong. The other one that was there with us, we had lunch. She was taking care of her kid at home, but her training and otherwise her job was, I can't remember, something legal as well. I want to say paralegal, maybe. I'm not sure. I know, I think there's somebody that works now in a bank. Somebody else who probably works in real estate, I want to say.
This is really generic. Because I've always wondered, like, those people who did really well at school, and this again is relevant to the students I teach, if they do really well at school, do they go on to be like super successful, as in making loads of money? Like,
I mean, these people have, they have a house in the suburbs. They live in the same suburbs I grew up in. They have, not all of them. One of them's in the south of France, and obviously one's in Hong Kong, who's like pretty successful as. But what you would normally think of successful, I guess, just like I think of those people that look at me and think I'm successful. But I don't know.
It's a real, like.
I mean, other people are just, they got kids, they married, and they have a house in the suburbs, and they got a job that probably pays them fairly well, I guess. I'm sure there are others who didn't get there. I think actually I learned there was a middle school person who died a few years ago, and somebody who reached out to tell me, oh, that person died. And I'm like, okay, I haven't talked to you or that person since middle school, but I'm sorry. I don't know what to say. That person's in Brittany and working as like IT engineer type person.
I think that the
like programming engineer.
So much of what young people think is how and I suppose it's the educational system again. The how you do in the exams determines your entire like future. And of course,
yeah, I mean, we talked about that one. It's normal because it encompasses your whole world when you're in the middle of it, when you're 16, 17. But there's more to life than that. So how do I revise? I read and memorize, I think, is the main thing I do.
And what about
when I was a smaller kid, I read a lot more than now, I think. And I learned to write pretty well by reading, I think, and also practicing, obviously. But I was always interested in words and writing. That's the thing that interested me the most. So I think that, and then I was really bad at note taking and forming thoughts or organizing them in the way that I was supposed to, and I just didn't. It just didn't work for me in college, at university.
And you weren't encouraged to find a way that worked for you?
Was I not encouraged to? I don't know.
Yeah. Like I discovered mind mapping in, I think I was at uni, and I think I've still got some of the mind maps I did in lectures.
I discovered mind maps after when I started studying design.
Because mind maps were basically an excuse for me to doodle all over the page, which is what I did. And I can still remember some of my economics lectures from some of the things I drew in the lecture, but it was just fiddling around. And I found the train of thought became more important to me. Like the rabbit holes. Like, oh, this is cool. Then that made me think of that. Then I'm going to go find out about this. And this would have been the mid to late 90s. Late 90s it would have been.
Yeah, I mean, I wrote quite a bit like that on my computer at the time. I had a computer. And actually on notebooks as well. I wrote whatever, but I have a lot of unfinished writing. I never do any finished writing, and that's one of the projects I'd like to take on now. Actually, maybe I'm old enough to actually finish something. I did finish poems back then, but that was, whatever, teenage poetry.
What about now? When you're
I really started taking notes. Sorry, this sounds like I'm feeling like this is disappointing you.
No, it's not at all. It isn't.
I really started taking notes through a friend of mine that I worked with in my first job in strategy 13, 14 years ago, who was using Evernote. And So that's when, and I really started using it, I would say, a lot more. And I'm still not using it to the max of its ability, but I'm mostly using it for text. 10 years ago when I started freelancing, when I was traveling. So I was using it a little bit before that, but not crazily so. And then when I had a lot of different thoughts and things going on and I was on the move, I thought, okay, I need somehow a better way to organize all this stuff. And actually I need to put it all there and put it all in Evernote. So I have, I have notebooks, notes, and stacks for just about every aspect of my life in there, from random notes to all the work notes to studies to links that are recorded to just about anything and everything. But it's a giant pit at the same time. I don't refer back to things. It just goes in there and I'm like, all right, I don't know where it's.
This is the
happening.
really, really big point, because
Yeah.
one of the things I really
and
like
I did
about
this with Delicious. Did you use Delicious for your link for your like saving URLs and bookmarks?
Oh, I did then? For a little bit. I did. And
so I had everything in there, and because I was just thinking of this new tool, I'm like, where are my Delicious links? They're somewhere. I think I exported them before the thing closed. If it's closed, I need to check. But you know, anything that all my tabs that keep open, that's been the most. I was going to say the most successful, not successful, but the most successful way to organize things.
How many tabs have you got open right now?
Not that many, because I had to close. I closed them for, I don't know, like 70 maybe.
How many?
2 windows, like 1, 2, like, I don't know, like 50 maybe.
50. Yeah. And you said that's not that many.
Well, usually I hover around 70.
So this is what's really fascinating to me, right?
Because if I close them, I'm never going to read that article.
No, I know what you mean, right? But when you talk,
and some people are like, "Oh yeah, I use Pocket." The Pocket is a really, but a lot of other people are a lot more organized than I am.
I used to use Pocket as well, but your ability to come up with ideas, like, is what I think is so cool about talking to you. Like the sheer, it's constant. It's so if you're coming up with ideas all the time, I was really interesting to hear you say it goes into a pit, like it just.
Yeah, sometimes it comes back randomly. Like, you know, last week, when I had this deadline and presentation, and when I have a deadline and I owe something to someone, all this stuff comes back. And I think I mentioned before, talking about revising, the main pitfall on preparation, revising, researching, or anything is how long do you give yourself to do that? Or at least for me, maybe for somebody else, it might be a different pitfall.
No, but for me, discrete edges help a lot.
Yeah, for me, I need to look at, all right, I'm going to do research on this topic because I have a client, a presentation, a thing, an idea. How long am I going to spend researching versus when do I start producing what I'm doing? If it's an essay, it's writing. If it's a presentation, it's writing the slides of the presentation or writing an outline of the presentation. And in the case of the thing I showed you last week, I had 48 hours. So you also need some time to just like hover around it a little bit. So just kind of open a few links, and it's part of research. I think it's part of familiarizing yourself with the project, but you need to have a little bit of time to kind of dilly-dallying around, looking at a couple of things, hanging out.
That bit's really useful, and that's the bit that students don't do. They won't allow themselves to look around and explore and see what they find. They won't. They want to cut straight to it. It's like they want to download the knowledge into their brains without giving themselves time to just go, ooh, what's this? Because that bit's really valuable. Is it
an efficiency thing? Or they just want to get done?
No,
I don't remember being very interested in a lot of the school topics that I had to.
I think it's an educational system thing. I think I also teach in a private school, so the parents are paying, the parents want to return. I joke about this, but it's true. I say to the people I teach, your parents want a return on their investment. You need to make sure that you do what you're supposed to do, i.e. shut up and listen to me. But that whole area, just exploring, and because it takes all the fun out of learning, of just like looking into something. I have to say, I had a lot of like excitement when I was reading that stuff and watching those videos you sent me.
Yeah. Should we talk about what we're talking about? Just
I
for the
think we
sake of it?
should. It's too
So
obscure. Evernote is great.
students
I use
have,
Evernote. It's
oh, sorry, go ahead.
Evernote's amazing. It's for me.
Do you know if
It's
your students use Evernote? Does anybody in your students?
no,
I
because we
think the
have.
need, I think the need really comes at university, you know, or is it because they're
I
not
don't
taught?
know. I
No?
don't know.
I mean, you could use it before.
I think it's because they're not taught. And Evernote is an app, a web app. I use it on my phone, and all I use it for is to capture the random thoughts that I have through the day, and then I group them. Now,
so it's quite simply, it's a note-taking / knowledge management tool.
Yeah.
With the icon being an elephant, the idea being that you don't remember everything that you're doing, writing, or just, you know.
And an elephant never forgets.
Yeah, and a lot of students, more like, I mean, I see there seems to be a higher incidence of, you know, master level, PhD level students that have to manage a lot of different thoughts together that start using those kinds of tools. Or at least, you know, so there's Evernote, and I also use Evernote. I have been an Evernote user for 10 years, as I said. And I recently found out that there's other tools like that. I mean, I knew there were other tools. I just didn't really go out and look for them because the
big thing that I think has begun to shift in school certainly is this idea of collaboration. So in class, I've had a Word document that we've all got on OneDrive, and we're all adding links to it. Now you have to go through the stupidity with teenagers because they'll just be like, oh, hello, and they'll post random rubbish on there. But once they've got that out of their systems, it's a really good way of putting everything that they're finding in one space. And we started using OneNote. And OneNote's a bit like Evernote.
It's the Microsoft version, right?
Yeah, I just hate it. I think it's horrible.
Do you have to use Microsoft because it's like your school thing?
Oh, yeah, because we use Microsoft Teams. Now, we've been teaching virtually.
I tried Teams and I did not like it.
So Teams okay.
It looks slick, but it's not, you know, there's things that I was not used to. I was like, well, why can't I present and see the chat at the same time?
Yeah.
No, you can't do that.
Right.
Like, oh God, okay.
Exactly. But the OneNote there's some really good stuff if you're teaching, but it's just horrible. I just really don't like it. But again, I've used it. The principle of collaboration, of people going off finding stuff and then putting it all together, works really well. And that has been a big shift in information, and of course driven by the internet. So you've been exploring this tool called Roam.
Yeah, I just heard about this tool called Roam,
Miro.
and
Miro is like a
no, Miro's different. Miro's a digital collaborative whiteboard.
Oh, okay, it's different.
So it's an open space on which you can go and work together on things. I mean, I can turn it on right now. I can show you what I'm doing for the workshop.
Well, hang on, are you talking about Miro or Roam?
Miro.
Okay.
Miro. And I published a presentation with reviews, my thoughts about 10 different tools for collaborating online, if you want to check it out, that I need to translate into French, or want to translate into French.
And Miro is one of them?
Miro is one of them. It's probably my favorite, but there's different categories of different tools for different occasions, right? So part of my webinar is a bit of a workshop-y exercise to show people, look, like there's tons of things you could be doing. And this is particularly, those tools are very useful for any creative design brainstorming endeavor. That's what they're designed for. Or not only, I mean, you can make up all sorts of different stuff. I use it for role-playing games. And I was first taught to use it, like I was first told by a friend who used it for role-playing games.
Wow. I might try it in class, Miro.
I mean, you should totally try it in class. You should, well, I mean, check it out. I'll send you my deck and you can have a look. And so I'm preparing a whole thing where I'm going to be talking, rather than showing just slides. I've prepared a video of myself talking of the topic I'm going to talk about and showing Paris. Just to tell people, look, we're bored of seeing your living room. I can make a video in a few minutes and look, I'm showing you Paris while I speak about the thing I speak about. So it's going to be meta because I'm going to be in the vignette here and in the video. But so it's all to say, like, you can mix things up. It takes time though to mix things up and do those things right. Because taking a video and producing it took time. Preparing a whole playground environment with tons of different things going on takes time. It takes a lot more time than throwing 3 bullet points on a slide and presenting it.
Now, this is great because I think the way
Just like
classroom,
I'll pull
the
back
way
to
cla-
research and revising, but
yeah, the way classroom teaching I think needs to move is more towards that playground, exploratory, everyone on one massive sheet of paper, just putting ideas together and exploring and coming on ideas, and the teacher guiding it.
yeah,
Because
it
I have
takes
the
some
knowledge
training
to
and
do
it takes
that.
some time. You already have a lot of time that is not classwork. So,
But
but I recommend it. I mean, it's part of the different tools that if you're working remotely, you could be using to add depth and to add collaboration that is otherwise difficult to only do on Microsoft Teams, for example.
Yeah.
Because Microsoft, for example, there's a whiteboard on Zoom, but it's really basic. The chat thing is super basic on Zoom. It's not great at all. We know it, right? And it might be the best solution might be a combination of things. So, for example, playing role-playing games with Miro, usually we are on Discord for audio or video if we want, but audio or video. But you don't really need video when you're looking at the whiteboard because you're working on the whiteboard and you can see everybody's cursor and what they're doing. So that's what you're looking at. You only need the audio to collaborate.
Really, that's really interesting. Because
yeah.
And you were going to talk about research.
Yeah, I was going to come back to revising because I was going to come back. So I said giving yourself a deadline, you know, a little bit of time to dilly-dally around, and that might be like, all right, I'm starting to work, but maybe I'll just check this article I was reading, or maybe I'll call this friend, or just like whatever. And then giving yourself a set time. Usually what I do, so in the case of that presentation last time, I didn't do that, but what I'm going to do is that's where I'm going to open a lot of tabs. I'm just going to Google stuff that what is this about? In the case of an essay, you're going to have a lot of references already because you will have your lessons, you'll have the book, and you'll have a topic that you need to write an essay on, like in the example of writing an essay. Now you have a topic, then you start, well, you know, the conversation we originally had, which was about how does this tabletop games company promote themselves?
It was.
How did they do that thing, by the way?
They're still working on it. They're into the second bit, which is all about creating the marketing campaign for it. I just gave them the very specific. So they've got X amount of money. They want to do this. They don't know whether they want to go to shops or at a convention.
Well, then if they watch this, it'll be useful. Then what do? You just start Googling, how do I market my campaign for games? And just like, and variations of that. Okay, what is the best media to sell this? How do I structure my marketing campaign? And you'll find tons of information. Like everything I do is not rocket science. I'm just only pumping it and learning it from other people who posted it online, and I repost my own stuff. So I'm just like participating to that.
No. This is
general bit of knowledge.
This is really important because.
And then you open a lot of tabs, I open a lot of tabs. Based on the question, I'm like, all right, cool. Read this. Check out this video, and multiple strings of research. As in, you don't only do one keyword search. You just like.
Okay, so
that's learning to research. It's basic.
This is so important.
But you need to know that. Like
you say it's basic. You say it's basic, right?
But that's foundational. You need to know those things. If you don't know those things, you're just lost. You're just only going to Wikipedia, which is not a bad source of things to get, but not the only one. And if in Wikipedia, the most useful thing is to be on a well-sourced page with tons of links at the bottom, and you go to those.
Okay, so again, this is the profound thing you've said today. Right?
Thank you.
I'm serious.
Took a while. Okay.
I'm totally serious because
I have a hard time with that one. I just don't think it's very.
You say, well, you need to take the compliment because you say that it's basic, and you say that the research thing is all of that. They don't know how to do that. They go to Google.
No, but that's what I'm saying.
They type in the actual question. They don't look for related terms, and they don't broaden their thinking. And the idea, I show them, look at this, and then I show the simple shortcut, press Control and click, and it opens multiple tabs. So you keep your search results, but then you have all the things you want to look at separate, and then you can investigate and see what you want to do. And then
and starting with the original question is not wrong, but like one of the other tabs I always have open is the thesaurus.
Yes.
I'm looking for synonyms, antonyms, like definitions of everything I'm looking at all the time.
I don't do that. That's really interesting. And then I've also said exactly what you said. Wikipedia is great as a starting point, but scroll to the bottom and look at all the references, and then look at the references and see where that goes and see what you can find out. I've said exactly the same thing, but knowing how to, if you're going to know how to revise, you've got to know how to research and allow yourself to explore. I think that's,
because revising is ultimately just, I mean, it's great. And you said it correctly that it is going back to knowledge management. So it's revising is something that I've not been great at. And I've pointed it out by saying how I've been using Evernote, which is I rarely go back to it. I do for certain notes that are recurring things like a to-do list or something I'm working on. But the vast majority of everything I've worked on is I have notes and bullet points and links that are just like copied there. And I don't know where they are. They're never going to be used again. Which is why I started looking at Roam as being an interesting tool for having bi-directional links.
I was literally about to say that. Bi-directional linking. Whoa.
Yeah. And I started very briefly looking at Notion because I was like, oh, that's a thing. And then I watched a couple of videos. Notion is another such tool, for knowledge management. And a lot of students seem to like it. Or people, just all sorts. That has an enormous amount of customization possibilities. So you can change, there's tons of different tools, tabs, charts, structures to organize your own wiki / knowledge management internal website or collaborative website. Colors, shapes, all sorts of stuff. So when I started looking at that, I was like, that is not for me. I will spend hours just looking at, I'm going to do this pin chart with that shape of whatever and not manage anything.
Do anything. You wouldn't actually do anything.
No.
I'm doing a guitar course, and one of the things this guy's done is he uses Trello, another kind of knowledge management thing, but he also uses Notion to sort out all his information. And I'm like, oh, that's really cool. And I'm a bit like you. I don't know how it's just, I can click on something and then it shows me there's all this information that it's nested really well. Yeah. So I know what to do using, I think that's Notion. And Trello has everything else separate, but he uses different tools for different things. And but it's, I know I would get into Notion. I could get into Notion and just be fiddling rather than actually doing anything. But for me, all roads lead back to Evernote until I saw your stuff about Rome. And then I got really excited because I thought, this is how my brain works.
Yeah. Yeah, and I started using it a little bit, joining this informal or loose collective of independent consultants called the Yak Collective, led by this guy called Venkatesh Rao. Do you follow his stuff online? I didn't know about him until a few months ago. And both Thiago Forte, that we just referenced, we talked about, who wrote this book called Building a Second Brain. I just learned about him a few weeks ago. I didn't know about him.
Yeah, I knew about him from before.
And Connor, I can't remember his name.
He's the guy who created Rome, yeah.
Yeah, so those two seem to be kind of friendly rivals, students. I mean, they follow Venkatesh Rao, who seems to be a very, very smart guy. And I like quite a few things that he's been writing. I'm just getting into him. And so anyway, the Yak Collective were one of the, have a Rome page. So that's where I found out about it. I was like, what is this thing? So I've had access to playing a little bit with their account, but not yet mine. And it's been on my mind for now 10 days because it's just eating me up to just commit to this thing because they just open the payment system.
What you will need to know is when Willem gets something on his mind, it stays in there and it bounces around and it bounces around and it bounces around.
It does quite a bit. And this one is like bouncing around a lot. And it's a big expense because it's not a cheap tool. They just officially opened it for the public. And you can either pay 15. Oh, by the way, we're not affiliated with these tools at all. We're not affiliated with any of these tools. Nobody's paying us to talk about Rome, Evernote, and all that
Oh,
stuff.
no. I will go on and on about Evernote because I think it's so amazing, and I'm beginning to get into this looking at Rome. And Rome is also interesting from a business point of view because of their funding structure, because they're not.
I like what he says about, so there, and I went to Reddit, and there are people like, oh no, but don't commit to this kind of thing. You can do this and this instead. But the solutions they're offering seem to be really techie, like complicated in a way that I'm like, yeah, I'm just a random user. I'm not going to start programming. You don't maybe need to program, but they're talking about points that I understand. So for example, saying, oh, well, it's a private company, it's going on to their server. I don't agree with that system. It should be open sourced, and I want it to be hosted on my thing, which I'm like, cool, but that's complicated.
Yeah.
Or it can be, or at least I'm not benefiting from the tools that these guys have built. But I do like they're not aggressively taking a lot of venture capital investment.
Which means they have much more control about what they do with their tool.
Yeah, and it seems, I mean, they could always do that later, right? But right now, it seems that they want to do is to grow like a normal business and get people to pay for their services rather than have the investment of a venture capitalist that wants extremely aggressive growth goals immediately.
Now, give me the money now. Yeah.
So that you have your return on investment, but then you're always, you need to grow in a way that is the model by which Airbnb, Uber, and Facebook have grown.
Just to link it back, at the beginning of this conversation, the thread that I was talking about on Twitter was put together, and the thing about writing being for thinking was put together by the guy who founded this tool, created this tool, Rome. And he's clearly done a lot of thinking about how we think, how we collect information, how we might want to reuse and revise information and learn, and the way we use knowledge. But the really interesting thing for me is, as a teacher, the way we use knowledge and the way we think about knowledge and represent it and store it informs how we see the world. Yep. Now, Rome seems to be a tool that is influencing all of that whole world in a way that mimics how my brain works.
Yeah, I watched the 2 interviews that the founder gave on video, one with Kevin Rose and one with Thiago Forte. And in both cases, and in other cases, he references and recommends a book that seems to have been a lot to do with founding the tool itself. And it's called How to Read a Book from the 70s, apparently. So I've written down that's a reference to read.
Okay, so I need to read that book.
Yeah.
No, I clearly need to read that book.
And I think that would be really interesting for all the students in talking about revising, because it's a book about how to read a book and how to manage the knowledge that you're getting out of it, how to structure it, how is a book structured, what is worth taking notes about or not. And it seems really interesting. And it's an old book that he fell onto quite randomly from like 1970 something, that he referenced as being a large inspiration for.
Change.
Yeah, no, they don't. Yeah, no, absolutely. And revising, so talking to revising is like, all right, so you have, and this is where it joins back the research that we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Revising for an exam or to prepare for something is going over knowledge that's already been given to you. That's the word, right? I think.
Yeah.
So I usually most of the time do research in new fashion because I'm working on a new project, a new client, and like tackling a topic that I don't really know about. Although it may well happen that I'm tackling a topic that I do know about because I've already worked on it before, and or a client that I keep working on, so I need to keep revising and referring back to existing knowledge. But I think the structure of giving yourself time, multiple questions, opening tabs, doing the research, and giving yourself a fixed amount of time to do that in, because something needs to be arbitrary. You're looking for the ideal piece of information, but you don't know what that is until you come across it. I know that the way my head works is like I absorb tons of stuff, and when under pressure with a deadline, stuff comes back. But it seems like Rome seems to be a tool to help things come back, like to help. But Evernote isn't. Evernote just goes in a black hole of stuff that it doesn't come back to me.
I mean, Evernote can be, but this is where I think that, I think it's how you have it set up, which goes back to my thing about the book that changed my world, which was Getting Things Done. And I read that book and I went for it. It shifted how I organize myself, everything. And this idea of it's all very well having the information nicely stored, but if you can't get it when you need it, what's the freaking point? And teachers are terrible for collecting rubbish that they just like don't use ever.
They're
Or,
terrible at collecting rubbish or great at collecting
sorry,
rubbish?
they're terrible for. I didn't explain it very well. They're terrible for collecting loads and loads of stuff that they think will be useful, that they'll never use and they never get rid of.
Yeah, I do that all the time.
I think teachers is like worse, and I think history teachers are the worst.
Oh, really?
It's all past. Yeah, they've got massive piles of stuff like, oh yeah, this will be useful, and they never use it. So I think that getting things done changed my outlook on things, and I've got now. He's very clear. The guy who wrote it, David Allen. I think he's quite cool. He's in his 70s now, but I think he's really cool. He's really clear that his way of thinking has got. It's not about a tool. It's not about using Evernote or this Trello or this paper system, whatever. It's completely tool agnostic. He's more interested in the thought process and the ideas and the principles. So when I apply those principles to Evernote, I can find stuff when I need it.
What is the principle?
There are a couple of them. One of the main ones is your head is for having ideas, not storing them.
Okay.
So most of the time, I will take things out of my head and put it down. And one of the other ones is where you are is your context is more important than the big list of things you have to do. So I have a list for when I'm not in the house of things I've got to do. So I remember them when I'm not in the house. You know, when I'm at my computer, there are things that I'll do. When I'm at school, there are things that I'll do. It's not just a big list of things I have to do. So there's a few different things, but that main one, your head is for having ideas, not remembering them.
That's good. I like it.
That was great. And that's allowed me to structure Evernote in a great way. But the bi-directional linking, that like sometimes I'll have an idea and I'll look at things in Evernote and then I'll want to go look at something else. So I'll open it, but then I'll have a list of other things. And when I watched the thing on Rome, I was like, oh man, I could have this thing and go and explore two other things at the same time and not lose the thread of where I'm going.
And the thing that was blowing my mind, the little I've used it on the account that I have access to, I didn't use it much, but I read more and in the interviews that I watched as well on the idea that we're used to because the computer files function like this, Evernote functions this. We're used to have an organizational system, like, you know, files and folders, themes, and
hierarchy.
A hierarchy. Yeah, exactly. So, and I was trying to figure out on Rome, I was like, well, wait, how does it work? And it doesn't, you don't need to have that at all. Like, you can create one, it's possible. But the idea is that for anything you create a new page, and I was like, where is that page? But it doesn't matter where it is because there is no hierarchy. You can have a hierarchy if you want to, but what matters is basically there's a simple, you just do open to, what's it called? It doesn't matter. You can create pages with either a hashtag or a double, what's it called? Not a parenthesis. Bracket. Yeah, the square bracket, double square bracket. So you type in 2 square brackets and all the pages, everything and anything you have there, just, you know, so while you're writing, all you need to do is type 2 square bracket and it'll bring back all the different stuff, whatever you have on your mind, and it'll all be linked with everything else that is the same that you can go and look at, and there's a visual representation of it. And this is only the beginning. They're planning on tons of different things. So that's why I'm interested in the deal they have, which is like commit to 5 years now financially, and you're helping us grow, and you're going to get all the first features. Because it's the whole believer plan, because there's a cult around it. There's the Rome cult, and there's in some of the video interviews they talk about cults as being a cool thing.
I mean, like I'm like that.
It's kind of interesting.
I've been using Evernote for years. I subscribe. I use all its features. It's really cool. But there's 2 things about what you said that are really interesting. If you don't have to remember the hierarchy, it frees up your brain to just explore. Yeah. And the second thing is, at school, some of the pupils, a lot of the pupils, what they find difficult is following. They're building their knowledge about something, which is hard enough as it is because they haven't been exposed to it, and they have to apply it and use it creatively. Their brains you've only got a limited amount of things you can think about. So it's really hard for them to be writing an essay and trying to remember what it is and like trying to put it all together. It's super hard. Yeah. And a tool like
And that's why you're
and
practicing at school. You're learning to develop that stuff in a way, aren't you?
now you are, but like I'm imagining a time when classrooms would be much more about collaborative learning from the teacher in a guided way with technology that effectively allows them to explore in a state of play. That would be amazing. You know, and Rome or Miro, whatever the tool is, can allow that. So you're constantly looping back and revising, you're constantly learning, but you're exploring.
Yeah.
And I think that it would be really cool for us to, I don't know, like, because Rome also, you said you can have a page set up that anyone can look at.
Yeah, you can do, well, you can have multiple. So I'm not entirely clear on all the possibilities for it, but
You can share it. Like I
you
can
can
have a
share
web
it. Yeah,
page,
yeah. You
just a
can
Rome
have
page.
multiple databases and you can share pages. And so I was trying to understand. I'm still not entirely clear. I think I got it. Like I have access to the Rome for the Yak Collective. I can create pages in it. I tried because it doesn't, as we said, it doesn't really matter what you're creating, and I can add to any of the pages. I'm a collaborator on it. If I wanted to, I could kind of start storing knowledge there, but it's not my account. But
Yeah.
yeah, but I'm not sure if that makes sense, but it doesn't really matter at this point because we're not showing it anyway. So,
No,
but
I still want
there's pages.
the visual.
It's a group thing. So there's a lot of. So for example, the Yak Collective is this collective of. So it's a collective of independent consultants. They have projects and conversations ongoing. And right now, I've not been super involved in it. I'd love to get involved more, but I just haven't had much time. But they're in process of deciding what the next project cycle is going to be. So a project cycle is a main like high level topic, and that is there's going to be a slide presentation done about that topic with a number of contributors who contribute each 2 slides. That is a bit of that overall knowledge. Okay. So at the moment, there's some voting and deciding on what is the next focus.
Okay.
So there's one page that has like, these are all the next projects coming on. And then for each one of the projects, there's a description of what that is. All the different people who are raising hands to say, yeah, I'd love to collaborate to that project and why I would be a good person to collaborate to that project, etc. And each one of those has a link to. So the first thing that it was done that was asked for me to do when I joined was to create a page for myself.
Yeah.
So there's a tag page called Willem van der Horst that has like a short description of who I am, what I do, where I am, links to my stuff, so that anybody looking me up can go, oh, okay, this is who Willem is, as a contributor and as a loose participant in the collective.
And what kind of, is it any kind of consultant in anything? Or
I think whoever, crazy? So you have to go on the website and look at yourself. You can join, by the way. You know.
I know. I'm thinking about it.
Yeah, you should. Oh, well, so the about spoke to me a lot. They just released their newest project. So the first one is "Don't Waste the COVID-19 Reboot," and talking about a lot of business trends that are going on during the pandemic. The new one that just came out that I haven't read yet is "The New Old Home," because the home just changed into a whole set of different types of stuff from a working remotely perspective. So that has a huge amounts of thoughts about where is the home at, what is it becoming, where can it go, as a both home and workspace hybrid. And I have to read it. I have not read it. So yeah, and there's a bunch of other topics coming around, and there is. So you can join, and all you have to do is just like go to the website, look it up, and join, and then the structure is Rome on one hand, and Discord on the other. There's a Discord server with a lot of different channels of conversation and tons of things going on that I can't keep up with. There's a lot of very smart people from all around the world contributing to this, which is really super interesting. Just being a part of it and just being able to tap and occasionally look at that kind of knowledge, but at the same time, I've already said, like, I have all these tabs open and I can't even keep up with everything. And I have this general, like, always, it's also great that I'm like, oh, I'm with these professionals that seem to be really on the ball, really smarter than I am. And I have all these people to look up to that I'm like, oh, I want to play in that field, which is cool. At the same time, also feeling like, oh my God, I'm way insufficient, inadequate, not fast smart enough to play with those guys.
And that can be like, I've said that to some of to every class I teach, you know, the people you hang out with, they're, you know, we are the sum of the 5 people we spend the most time with. I don't know who said
and
that.
in that
like,
sense, I was like,
that.
I need to spend
And
more time
by
with people
chance,
like this. Sorry, I cut you
yeah,
off. I didn't hear the
because it will
end of what
push
you
you.
said. Yes.
I don't remember. There's a bit of a lag today. I
think there was a tiny bit of a
my
lag.
internet.
That's okay. But just like the conversations with you are really helpful.
Oh, well.
So how do we revise? And how do you, and I think also, how do you know that you're ready? Once you, like, how much revising is enough?
Oh, that's a great point. And I think the only way, I suppose in the real world, the only way to know whether you're ready is to produce something.
Well, that's one way to go.
What were you going to say?
I was just going to go back to what I had said before, is that there's a number of arbitrary points. You don't know if you're ready. You don't.
Like the time?
The time, having a deadline, presumably, like, let's say you're revising for an exam. By the time the exam arrives, whether you're ready or whether you think you're ready, whether you feel you're ready or not, that's all the revision you get. So I'm not sure how best to translate or give something to say, like, relax about it. But that's also part of the reason where I think a deadline is arbitrary. You need to give yourself a deadline for revisions and research, because you can't know everything. You don't know in advance what the exam's going to be. So you have to be able to trust that you know enough. Usually in high school, and you usually have a fair idea of what it's going to be covering, because the teacher will have told you it's covering this part of the book or these topics. So you do have an idea. But in addition to that realm of, we're studying this type of business, or the things that we studied for the past 4 weeks, whatever the teacher told you.
Yeah.
In addition to that, give yourself a certain amount of time. And I'm trying to think of a way to say, like, relax beyond that, but I don't know how well, like, aside from experience, I'm not sure. And we all have different ways of approaching it. I used to be pretty relaxed, maybe too much. Some people are a lot more stressed out, but
you, again, I think this is the second profound thing you said today. Like, you never
getting
know.
To the end, so I'm trying to say another. Like,
I don't worry. We will. The second profound thing you said, like, you never know when you're ready. You're ready.
That's why just give yourself an arbitrary thing. The only thing, or the other one is, like, you're ready when the exam is due or when the essay is due.
Yeah. I mean, one of the problems we have in school is that we give them mock exams in January, and they never take them seriously because it's not the real thing.
Yeah. So no, why would you?
It's only because the summer, then, like, there's a crescendo. It's like they really go for it. But there's so many.
But even if you don't take it that seriously, it's all practice.
That's true.
It's all practice. So it is getting, I mean, you can't, yes, ideally you would take it seriously as a student, and maybe practice more, but what does that even mean? If it means doing what we said, which is, like, take X amount of time, give yourself that time, give yourself a deadline, learn about a bunch of stuff. And then actually I was missing that part. So give yourself X amount of time to open lots of tabs, generate new pieces of knowledge and threads towards, like, learning on the topic, and then close everything up and start synthesizing.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
So that's stuff I didn't do very well in school at all, but I do a lot better now that I'm working. So open up a lot of avenues, and then, give, at the end of your given time, arbitrary, just like give yourself 2 hours, whatever, write down what you got out of it, a few bullet points, like that's the synthesis of what you just learned. And so that you've revised. And it's also a way to go, okay, well, the 3-part of a presentation, saying what you're going to say it, and repeat it. So, I'm going to research this. This is all I'm researching, and this is what I found out.
That's how you revise, guys. Do it. And read books.
Thank you, James.
That's great. I've got to go read the book about how to read a book.
Yeah, me too. Cool.
Like an episode of Rick and Morty.
Yeah. Good note to end. Anything else to add?
Nothing for me.
Great. Me neither. Wait, let me just...